Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to bring you a recommendation video of science fiction audiobooks. I have done this several times before, not just for sci-fi, but also fantasy, horror, and thrillers. So I'm going to have a playlist linked in the description box as well as up in the cards. So if you want even more recommendations, if you are also a obsessive fan of audiobooks, you can have those videos to check out afterwards. But otherwise, let's get started. First, let's talk about War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, and this of course is the classic story of a Martian invasion, and in my opinion this is a fantastic book to read on audio. I do find that a lot of classics, especially H.G. Wells, really translates well to having it narrated to me rather than me reading it physically with my eyes. The version that I want to recommend, because a classic of course has many different audiobook narrations, but my personal favorite is done by Simon Vance. He's one of my favorite narrators. He has done a lot of my favorite fantasy books, and his performance is just fantastic. He has a UK accent, and he just gives this haunting performance that for me really uplifts the book. It creates this atmospheric experience where you just really feel like you are there with the characters. It's told in this first person perspective, which again I think is great for audiobook telling. And because of that, I really felt as if aliens were coming down. I listened to this for the first time late at night, and I just found this book to be scary and again atmospheric, and I really think that the audio is the way to go. So if you can get your hands on Simon Vance's narration, that's my personal recommendation. Obviously, I highly recommend it. Next, I want to recommend Snowcrush by Neal Stephenson, and this, of course, is a classic cyberpunk story following a protagonist named Hero Protagonist, who is a pizza boy but also a hacker, and the story, of course, goes from there. This is one that I definitely recommend listening to on audio because the narrator's voice and the cadence of how he tells the story just makes it so much better. Of course, the story is great in and of itself, but for me, the audiobook experience really uplifted it because you got to hear the rhythm, and there's definitely a rhythm to this story, and it just makes it so cool and so fun, and I do really recommend it. I have to give a notice that this of course is an Audible exclusive, which I always say I hate to recommend. Audible is not the best company, of course, because it's backed by Amazon, but they do keep bringing me back with those exclusives, and the performance honestly is worth it. So if you can get your hands on it, if you do have an Audible subscription, this one definitely might be worth the credit. I really think it's the best way to check out this classic. And sticking with Neal Stephenson, I also want to recommend his other book, Zodiac. And this one follows a young man who believes himself to be a little bit of an environmental vigilante or a Spider-Man. So he goes around trying to save the world, or at least his area of Boston, from various environmental hazards, and he goes around trying to save the day with his friends. This is not an Audible exclusive. I actually listened to it via Hoopla through my library, so if you have that service, definitely try to look and see if it's still there. But once again, I really feel like Neal Stephenson has a cadence to his writing that you really don't see until you actually get it told to you or narrated to you on audio. This one has a different audiobook narrator, but if you like the narration of Snowcrush, I feel like this one has a similar tone. There's something just really cool about the way the story is told, and you almost just have to listen to a sample to see that for yourself. But I thought this book was really fun. The story is entertaining, but again, it's one that I probably liked more because of how much fun the narrator made the story. And so again, if you kind of want that vigilante going around, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, it's a lot of fun, and at the same time, because of course it's Neal Stephenson, he includes a lot of science, so I learned so much about not only environmental issues but also chemistry, and again, having it told to me was the perfect way to experience this story. Next, I want to talk about Fuzzy Nation by John Scalzi. This is a story of a man who is an ex-lawyer and is now working as a contractor, and he ends up discovering a planet with a great amount of resources, and so the company that he is working for wants to exploit that. However, he becomes very conflicted when he discovers that this planet is also home to these highly intelligent creatures that he kind of nicknames the Fuzzies, and then he ends up going to court to protect them and prove that they actually have this intelligence in order to save them and their planet. So this is a book that I want to recommend specifically because of the narrator. For most of John Scalzi's new books, at least, they are all done by Will Wheaton, and if you watched my previous recommendation videos, you know that I love his narration. I am a huge fan of Star Trek. I love his appearances on The Big Bang Theory, and I really just love his voice. I really think that he gives a performance and doesn't just simply read the text. And he also brings a lot of humor to his stories, which of course John Scalzi writes really funny science fiction, which Fuzzy Nation definitely has those elements to it. And so again, he really brings that to life. He brings it to the forefront of the story. And it's just so entertaining. I really recommend Will Wheaton's books, or his narration at least, to those that are perhaps reluctant readers. If you're going on a car ride with someone like myself and my husband, he doesn't really read a lot of audiobooks, so if I'm going to put one on, I typically put on something narrated by Will Wheaton because those tend to grab his attention a little bit more than some other narrators. And again, John Scalzi himself is a fantastic writer, and this one is fun and fast. Again, this is an Audible exclusive, but in my opinion, again, if you have the credit, I think it's worth the investment. I picked mine up when I had a credit available, and I don't regret it. And along the same lines, if you are already a fan of John Scalzi and Will Wheaton, I also recommend trying out The Collapsing Empire by John Scalzi. If you have not yet read that one, that is the first book in the Interdependency trilogy. And this is set in a future where we have discovered these flow paths that allow for fast travel throughout the universe, and so it has allowed for humanity to expand and go to other places to colonize them, and then these flow traffic allow for economic trade in order to move resources to where they need to go. And then this entire empire is managed by this corporate entity, the Interdependency, and we get to follow the perspective of the emperor, the person who is in charge of this all. You find out that there are hidden secrets behind all of this, and possibly the flow itself is beginning to collapse. And the idea is that some of these colonies are going to be cut off in the future and won't have access to these resources that are coming in. And so a huge economic crisis, a survival crisis, is potentially going to happen, and the story goes from there. Just like with other John Scalzi books, this one has a lot of humor. It's very irreverent with tons of swears and all of that, but if you enjoy it, once again, it's done by Will Wheaton, and I thought this one was a lot of fun. I don't think it's my favorite John Scalzi book, but again, because of Will Wheaton's narration, I'm still glad that I bought a copy of it because I thought it was really fun and entertaining, and I would definitely reread it just simply for his performance there. And I also want to recommend Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. This is a novella that follows a young woman who is leaving her home world in order to go study at a university. Her own people are reluctant to have her go. She's actually the first person to leave home and do this because while they are a highly intelligent, knowledge-based community, they really believe in studying the world from home rather than leaving and going out to experience things directly on other planets, etc. And so she's really going against the wishes of her family, but she sneaks off to do this because she believes that she wants this higher education. And the story takes a sharp twist when she is on the ship traveling to the university, and I'll leave it there. But this is one that I would recommend for those of you that like shorter audiobooks because, as I mentioned, the first book is a novella. There are 2 follow-up books. I don't think they're as strong, but they're all done by the same narrator, so if you like the first book, you certainly can continue. These books were available for me through Hoopla, which again is a library app, so definitely check that out again if you don't want to spend a credit on something that is shorter. But I do think that if you're going to read these books, the audio is the way to go. It has an own voice as narrator because, of course, Nnedi Okorafor is a Black author and really brings in that diverse perspective. She ties together different ideas into this beautiful story of African futurism, and I really liked what she did with it. So if you can't tell, I would absolutely recommend this one for those of you that are looking for a more diverse, different, fresh take on the science fiction genre. This is definitely the audiobook to pick up. Next up, I want to recommend listening to the Expanse books on audio. The first book, of course, is Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. This is an epic space opera series that is 9 books long. Each book is fairly long. The physical book is always over 500 pages. In the first one, we follow 2 perspectives, one being that of Holden, who is an ice hauler and discovers something that he shouldn't. We also follow the perspective of a man named Miller, who is investigating the disappearance of a young woman. And through the story, their perspectives become intertwined as they discover this larger plot that is happening, and the story goes from there. I think most people know The Expanse, but not everyone has read it because they're very intimidated by the books. I always say that even if you're not a huge fan of space opera and science fiction, these are so accessible, they're so easy to get into. I physically read the books all the first time, but upon reread, I have gone back and listened to the audiobook experience, and I gotta say, I can see why people love it so much. So if you're looking to get into the story, I think the audiobooks might be a really good starting point for those that are intimidated. The narrator, Jonathan Mays, does a fantastic job. He has different voices, but they're not overdone, and he just, again, has a really good cadence to his voice. It's very pleasing to my ears. And again, even if you're someone like me who has read these books before, they are worth rereading, and for me, going back and doing the audio kind of makes it a new experience all again. I picked up things I missed when I was reading it the first time through, and so I really do encourage you to check it out. And again, for those of you that like to get longer books on audio because you kind of want to get your money's worth if you're buying them, these ones, like I said, will keep you busy for several hours each. And again, if you like the first book, you can keep going, and it gives you a chance to kind of, keep picking up book after book until hopefully you finish up the series and love it as much as I do. I've done a whole playlist on The Expanse, so if you want even more content on that, definitely go check that out. And finally, I'm going to end the video by cheating just a little, and I want to recommend Rocketmen by Robert Kurson. And this is actually a piece of nonfiction, and the reason I want to cheat and include this here is that I personally do not read a lot of nonfiction. I definitely prefer fiction, but then I found out that this was narrated by Ray Porter, who, those of you know him for doing the Bobbyverse series, for doing Project Hail Mary. He is a beloved narrator, and he really brings the story to life. So while this is technically nonfiction, I really forgot that going through it. It read like a sci-fi thriller. It was so exciting. If you like sci-fi stories that are all about the astronaut experience, this is definitely one to check out. I flew through this one because, yes, Ray Porter just gives an incredible performance, and I really think that he nailed it with this one. So again, if you are open to trying it, really encourage you to give it a try. And it's a great way to sneak in a little bit of nonfiction, feel like you learned something, and still get a great audiobook experience at the end of the day. So that's it for this video. I'd love to hear of the books I talked about, which ones are you planning on checking out for yourself? And if you're looking for more recommendations for audiobooks, whether they be sci-fi or other genres, don't forget to check out my playlist up in the cards and the description box. I would also love to hear from all of you, what are your favorite sci-fi books on audio? If I haven't checked them out yet, I certainly will, because I'd love to continue making these recommendation videos. I do a lot of audiobooks. I just really enjoy that narrative experience, and so I will definitely keep doing these if you keep enjoying them. So if you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, consider subscribing for more audiobook content. And you can also help me out by sharing this video around online. And if you hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss another video from me. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.